Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our user panel today. My name is Tom DeBeauchamp. I am going to be your host for the user panel. I'm a customer success manager here at Zoom In, and we have a great topic today. We're going to be discussing how you can really unlock your product documentation's potential to help you reduce support costs. I think most of the people who will be dialing in or tuning in today and in the future on the video are going to be familiar with the value of technical documentation to allow customers to self-serve, as well as the value to support agents and reducing the amount of time it takes them to do their jobs. But that knowledge isn't always widely shared across organizations. And so we've got a great panel of experts today to help me to talk through how you all might be able to unlock the potential and the power of your technical documentation in kind of a cross-functional collaborative way to reduce the costs to your support organization. So before we get to introductions with our panelists, I want to make kind of a quick housekeeping announcement and to let you know a little bit about the structure of this panel. We are going to start out with a couple of polls. And so you'll have the opportunity to fill out the poll, and I really ask that you do. It makes it a lot more fun to get some feedback from everybody out there on the line. And in addition to that, as we're talking through, feel free to ask questions through the Q&A and to make comments in the chat. The more feedback we can get from you, I think the livelier the discussion will be. We're going to keep our eyes on that and try to answer your questions as we go along. So with that housekeeping note out of the way, let's dive in with some introductions. And let me ask, Pat, would you mind starting us off and introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Pat Burrows. I'm the Director of Information Development at Rocket Software. I've been in the ID industry for quite a long time, working in multiple high-tech companies, and the last 3 years at Rocket.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pat. And Billy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Billy Cook. I'm the Director of Knowledge Management at ADP. For those who don't know, ADP is a Fortune 500 global provider of human capital management solutions. In other words, ADP helps companies manage people and their time, their payroll, their benefits, et cetera. And I'm embedded in the client experience team. And my focus is on enabling clients to self-serve through knowledge services.
Wonderful. Thank you, Billy. And last but not least, Seth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I am a solution architect here at Zoom In. Before coming to Zoom In, I spent just about 20 years in the information development world, looking at content strategy and tools and trying to align all the work we do to the bottom line of the business. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here. I think this is a fantastic subject, and I couldn't be happier with being able to talk about it with all of you. So to start us off, we're going to start with a poll. And so if we can just release the poll right now, and if everyone, if you can take a look, we're going to ask you, how connected are the product and support teams at your company? And just take a minute to answer that. And then while you're looking through this, I just want to underscore a few kind of interesting data points that we've uncovered recently here at Zoom In. We contracted with Frost & Sullivan for some research on just this subject. And some of the things that we found that I think are really crucial to this discussion are that 81% of users prefer to self-serve on products rather than reaching out to support. 99% of users say technical content is a primary or secondary criteria in the decision to purchase. That's almost 100%. 84% of users would consider switching brands after a poor experience using a documentation portal. And then I think a really interesting and certainly very relevant fact that we found in this research is that more than half, 52% of support cases could be avoided using existing content. So not even writing new content, but just being able to connect those the users themselves to the content that already exists. More than half of support cases could be avoided. So some really interesting data that kind of backs up the importance of this kind of a conversation. I think we can go ahead and probably end the poll now and just take a quick look at what we've got. So panelists, I wonder if you have any thoughts as we take a look at this. About 70% of our respondents felt that there was, to some extent, there was some kind of collaboration, but not strong and certainly not at all. Any thoughts?
So I think this actually mirrors what I see at Rocket since I joined a few years ago. I think the support teams work closely with development, but not so much with ID and the other organizations. That's something we're really focusing on now is building that that relationship so that we do work more closely together.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's take another poll. So I think that one went really well. So let's do another quick minute-long poll. And this one will ask a slightly different question. So what prevents customers from self-serving with your existing documentation? We'll just take another minute to answer that question. So hopefully everybody out there is seeing the poll and is able to start answering that. I see some answers coming in now. It's kind of fun to watch the numbers. So yeah, that question again, what prevents customers from self-serving with documentation? All right. So I think we can probably end that question here. And it looks like, again, in the north of 70%, we've got it exists, but it cannot be found. A second place, the options for information are overwhelming. Panelists, any thoughts on that before we dive into the main question and answer section of the panel?
I think for me, I kind of gravitated personally to the 27% that kind of came in there of customers prefer a phone call, because to me, that rings as like a massive challenge. It's one thing if you have content out there, but if customers are preferring to a phone call, that's a deeper problem. I know at ADP, our company started as a service company, and those roots run really deep. And as long as clients are sold a white glove service, why should they self-serve? You can put everything out there in the world you want, but there's no reason for them to go there when they can pick up a direct line and contact their representative. And I think if you can overcome that challenge, even at a basic level of having clients utilize content to address low-hanging fruit, like password resets or order status, I think then your organization can dedicate a lot more energy to more critical and high-value work. So that one, I mean, it jumped out at me because it is a quarter of the folks, and to me, it's a pretty substantial challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for Rocket, we had a doc library that was really not searchable at all. And customers got into the habit of calling support, and support would just send them the PDF of the content. And so we're working really hard with our new doc library to get support not to do that and just send them the link to the doc library so that they will get it on their own. Change the behavior. We'll see.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. This kind of leads directly into our first question in the kind of challenges and solutions Q&A section. As we're thinking about these poll results and thinking about certainly the experiences that you've all had in your careers, I'm curious, and maybe Pat, you've actually even started to answer this just now, but what is the greatest challenge that you've faced in the kind of this pursuit of providing that self-service experience? Is there one area in the company ecosystem that you would recommend focusing on? We all have limited resources. Like what is that biggest challenge and the place to focus first?
Yeah, I think for us the biggest challenge was our old doc library was on an old platform, and it really was not very searchable. It was all PDFs. I think again, I probably did start answering this question with support. Getting support to direct customers and not just support. I mean, we go around talking to the other functions all the time, whether it's support or the field, sales, marketing. When you talk to customers, point out this new doc library and encourage them to go there and visit for themselves. Give them the link, don't give them the PDF. Because I think they'll find it a lot more helpful. But I think that's the biggest challenge, is making it searchable and then changing the behaviors of customers that are used to doing something a certain way.
Yeah, Seth and Billy, any other thoughts from you, like greatest challenges from your perspectives?
So I'll just say, just like looking at the, go ahead, Billy.
Go ahead, Seth.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm looking at the results and some of the comments coming in. I just wonder if there's like a segment of the population who just doesn't believe that self-service works. Like they've had bad experiences in the past, and there's a comment here saying that they've prominently, placed their help center directly within the software, and people aren't using it. That's disturbing to me. I wonder what's behind that. I'd like to dig into that somehow.
It's funny, Seth, you gravitated toward the comment I was looking at, and the reason it jumped out at me is because we just did a bunch of research and found that 8% of our active client practitioners in our product actually click the help center content. So we're talking
8%?
even less percent.
Wow.
8, yeah. So, but I don't think it's a problem with a single solution. It's a multifaceted problem. I mean, we talked about service models. You talk about awareness, you talk about, incentives, motivation. I mean, there's so many different things that factor into that, that you can't just kind of treat it with, there's no kind of magic bullet to solve that problem. And I think, we'll talk more about it through the course of this webinar, I'm sure, but that comment, Rob, it jumped out at me for sure, because we have a very similar situation on our hands.
Well,
it's almost like self-service needs a PR firm to fix some of those old ideas, right?
I wonder if some of it too is people want to just have someone tell them the quick answer, what they think might be a quick answer, or some people don't want to have to read something. They want to be told, they want to see a quick video. I don't know. I think it's a multifaceted thing as to why it works for some and not for others.
So if it's multifaceted, and I think that does seem to be kind of, not just the consensus, but certainly the truth, and there's no magic bullet, what would be maybe the top 3 sort of magic bullets? Like what would be the areas where you might think, here's the place to focus? Certainly, Billy or Pat, that would be great to hear kind of what you're thinking of right now. Like, or maybe the follow-up is more direct. Billy, with 8% of clicks, or even if it were higher, like it is for Rob, what do you do about that?
Well, yeah, it's not an easy problem, like you said, and I think what's even more daunting is the fact that that's 8% of active users, and when you factor in all potential users of our product, you're getting closer to the 0 to 1% side of things. Because we actually have a huge population that doesn't use the product at all, because why should they if they can call their direct support? They have kind of a direct line to the people who are responsible for supporting them. So I think service model in our case is a big issue that it needs to be addressed. And I think it's a political problem and certainly a cultural problem, a sales problem. I mean, you look at, what's the messaging we're giving to clients when we're selling them on our products? The other factor, at play is, and I'll talk about, something, actually, I'll save it for kind of a later part of the conversation, but I think there's just so many pieces of this that have to be addressed thoughtfully, that it's not, like to your point, we talked about this, not a single magical bullet that's going to do it. And I think, maybe we've talked about potentially incentivizing clients to call. I mean, that's one option. There's also the stick method, or both. You could, tell people they can call 3 times a month, and after that, then, certain penalties happen or charges happen. That's a little extreme for some, but you're trying to change behavior. It may not be a pleasant experience at the start.
It's really interesting.
I think too, I just saw a comment pop up. I can't see all the comments, they come and go, but there was something about customers being frustrated. And one of a big area of focus for us at Rocket right now is minimizing the content. Our company supports its modernizing software for old mainframe systems is a lot of what we do. So a lot of our products have been around for a while. There are huge doc sets that, sometimes for some of the doc sets, it does take kind of sifting through them, with the conversion and getting it out there in HTML. I think that's helping, but I can see where, people, if they get there and they see there's a ton of content, it might seem overwhelming. So I think a focus area for us at least needs to be reducing the volume of the content.
It's really interesting. So it seems like, if we do think of like two of the large areas that have an impact here, two big challenges. One is, I think, Pat, what you're talking about is kind of this more content strategy. Like how do you put the content in the right form so that it can be found? Good question. Like that's one we certainly talk about a lot. And then there's another, which I think has to do more with organizational makeup. And, Bill, you mentioned it was sort of like there's a political quality to this as well. I think we could think of this as like a cross-functional collaboration, but it's even bigger than that, right? It has to do with the way that, customers are sort of entrained to find information. And I think to Jess's comment in the chat that you're talking about, Pat, if customers are frustrated using one path in the past, they're likely to use less frustrating paths in the future. So these two things kind of go together. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about cross-functional collaboration and ways that, from your positions within kind of the documentation world, you're able to work with others in other kind of related groups to address parts of this issue. So, how do you, boost that impact and visibility of the documentation that already exists, that can already resolve, more than half of support cases? How do you work better with these other teams?
I think for me, the answer I would give is learning and development. And before I elaborate, I give that answer because in corporations, learning and development and your knowledge or content teams are often considered distinct disciplines, when in fact they're not. Both are dealing with cognition and facilitating knowledge transfer, albeit with different methodologies. But being that we treat them as separate entities, it's that much more critical that we collaborate with those teams, because we too often assume that our products are intuitive. We too often assume that the users of our content or products are information literate, and that's seldom the case. It's critical that new clients are provided training necessary to understand our products and services and the processes that we have. But more importantly, to embed within that training the behaviors we wish to see them exhibit. So, for example, where do they go to find content? How to search effectively? What channels do we want them to use when the content isn't sufficient? And so on. And that's the thing that I think is an area of opportunity for us at ADP, because the business that I in particular support has never had client training for new clients, for existing clients. So, we're actually actively working on implementation of a client-facing learning management system with that aim to, from the start of a client coming on, we should be helping them from day one, start to change that behavior or direct them into the behaviors and channels we want them to use. And without that, I think you're kind of ice skating uphill.
That's great.
So I think that's a really good point. At Rocket, we don't have one learning group. A couple of our acquisitions came in with learning services groups, and we've started collaborating with them. We also collaborate some with product management, but also in certain product areas with our user experience designers, because they do a lot of customer research. We've kicked off actually a couple of projects recently where we're bringing a lot of these groups together that either create content or use our content to really dive in and look at are we creating the right thing? Are we targeting the right audience, and trying to really improve on what we do? So I think there's a lot to be said for cross-functional collaboration.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comments that are coming in are really interesting. A lot of them are pointing to basically bad behaviors or maybe even lazy customers. Nobody said that, but I think that's kind of the undertone I'm hearing. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about the concept of case deflection. Sorry, Tom, if you wanted to ask that question later, but
No, go for it, Seth. This is great.
yeah, so the way that we think about case deflection, first of all, I hate that term. It's so negative. It's not like we're saying, get out of my way. I'm not deflecting you. What case deflection actually is an additional opportunity for a quality content experience, right? And so what it means is at the time that you're entering the ticket, if you've had bad behaviors or if you've been lazy and you're entering the ticket, you have one last chance to catch you, right, before you enter that ticket. So as you're entering the ticket and search is coming up with some topics or KB articles that may be useful to you, I'm wondering if a really solid case deflection strategy could be that exact tool that we're looking for to help re-educate our users to trust our content, to maybe start with searching the portal, with maybe, doing some of the things that we would rather them do, because maybe that starts to gain them a little bit of confidence of, okay, yeah, I guess that content is actually there. Okay, yeah, I guess search actually does work. So maybe instead of using the case entry portal as my main methodology of getting content, maybe I could have started that search or that journey a little bit more upstream. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Or to build on what you're saying, Seth, if our users struggle with the pull, going out and finding information and getting the right information, then we can do better to push it to them at their point of need. So if, that's where we can alleviate some of that pain and make it easier, because I see a lot of the comments, it's too much information, it's hard to find. Well, that's where we can do some of that work by, having intelligent content, hooking it into those points where, say, they are filling out a service request or something like that within your product, and it's surfacing that knowledge right when, as they're filling out those fields and going, hey, before you hit submit, there's, I think those type of opportunities, to your point, not only show the value of the content, but meet your business objectives at the same time, and potentially have people go, oh, but maybe I should look there next time, or maybe I should go explore it more. So yeah, I agree. It's a powerful solution.
Mm-hmm. Those, I wonder, maybe I'll phrase this as a question, like with those case deflection, I'm sorry, Seth, I have to call it this, but with those kind of case deflection moments of search, they seem like they would provide a really good opportunity for collaborative discussion between groups, right? Because they tend to be at those moments of intersection between one organization and another, obviously with support and like a documentation type team. And I wonder how best to use, like supposing you had those kinds of points, like you mentioned, Billy, I wonder how best to use those moments, those kind of shared moments to be more strategic even, kind of what we're talking about a little bit is kind of shifting it left or allowing the customer to not always go to that case form to search, but to find all of the other methods that they might be able to do it. And I wonder what sort of conversations you can have if you do kind of have that just-in-time sort of search mechanism. How does that improve that collaboration across teams?
I'll just say that I really like the way that you brought that up. It's almost like the case deflection point is like an estuary, like with salt water and the fresh water come together, right? And it's a proof that your customers don't care about your organizational structure. They want the answers, right? And so that experience is proof that you really need a corporate sort of content culture, right? You don't need silos, you need a content culture where it's at that point that it actually matters. And I think if you can use that to compel people to understand that point of view and maybe move at a 73% saying somewhat aligned, make that 73%, fully aligned. I think that's probably one of the most important things you could probably do in your career for your company, for your customers.
That is a bold statement. And I wonder, for those of you who are out there in the chat, what do you think about that? Is creating a content culture one of the most important things that you think would benefit your company? I happen to agree with Seth. I think it is. But yeah, I think this is great. So Pat and Billy, I don't know if you had any follow-up on that as we kind of start to think a little bit more about maybe research and that sort of thing. But
no, I think it's an important idea. It's kind of, I guess that kind of captures what we're trying to do at Rocket. When I joined Rocket 3 years ago, ID was extremely isolated. It worked with Deb. That was it. We've been really pushing, and now that we have our new tools and we can be more collaborative, we're really pushing with some of the groups to try this, where it seems like people are more open to it. Push this collaborative, let's work together to create the strategy for this product, create the content. We know that there are multiple groups creating the same content in separate streams and try to bring all that together. And our feeling is that if we can do it with a couple of groups, then we can show the value and push it out. It's kind of like baby steps, but that's really essentially what we're trying to do, is create more of a content culture where ID was just this group over there and nobody really paid a whole lot of attention, where now, we've come together as a centralized team. We're trying to elevate the visibility of ID and create that culture where people are really thinking about the content.
Very cool. Well, let's maybe have like a quick, not quick, we'll take the time we need. I want to ask another question is what I'm trying to say. So getting the right data, I think, is really important. So we're talking a lot about, having a content culture and cross collaboration. We're talking a lot about proving the value essentially of the documentation internally, but then also it sounds like to our customers themselves. And I'm wondering, kind of when we think about making those, proving that value and proving that setting things up like a case deflection opportunity, those kind of estuaries, I love that image. We need to make sure we have the right data. And so I'm wondering if you all would want to talk about kind of advice you have or thoughts you have around what's important to look at, to know what's working, what isn't. There might be folks on the call who are at different points in their data journey. So maybe we can talk a little bit about things that you've measured in the past, things that you'd like to measure. Seth, I don't know if you wanted to start us off.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's lots of discussions about KPIs, what KPIs matter, and it's all really important because, at the end of the day, all businesses are in the business of making money. So things like supporting your financials, your ROI, your revenue, and your margins, like that's all really important. One thing that I've noticed though, when working with people in the C-suite level, is that they're usually very passionate about their business. They have a lot of pride in the company that they're working for. And even though it's not hard data, I think it's really useful to really listen to what your senior leadership is saying and tie your story to that, and to tie it, to that story with like a maturity model. Because the other thing about people in the C-suite I've noticed is they really want to know the truth, like where are we today, and then where are we going? So I think with all of your objectives, like if your objective is to become a content culture, right? Make sure you define like what that actually means, where you are today, what kinds of steps would be required in order to bring the L&D team or the marketing team or the ID team together, and those kinds of things. Because the story behind what you're doing to be excellent and be the best at what you do is just as important as some of the data. Of course, you need the data. But in general, I would say the most important thing to do when messaging up is to make sure that you're talking in their terms and that you're tying what you're doing to what they're doing in terms of a roadmap. Because everything that you're doing, you're not doing for the sake of doing it. You're doing it to lay the foundation for the next thing you want to do, right? To always be greater the next time. So yeah, that's my advice.
That's great. Billy and Pat, I don't know if you have any thoughts about kind of that idea of maybe focusing a bit on kind of the story almost in as much as the data itself. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, and especially I'm picking up what somebody's saying in chat right now. I mean, the title of this webinar is using content as your secret support agent. And the power of content is no secret to really probably anybody on this call, but in my experience, it is an unknown to our C-suite or the senior leadership team, the people who employ us, approve our business cases, eliminate our obstacles. I think we need to obviously spend time to educate them. I mean, we always think about, how do we show the case deflection numbers or how do we show client satisfaction? But I think the thing that you hear most, or I've heard most from senior leaders is it's very much a politician kind of behavior where they'll go visit various offices and they'll come back and say, I met Joan, the account manager in the Alpharetta location, and sat down with her and watched her do her job. And then they'll tell this whole tale, and that'll feed into like, I want to fix this. I think that the power of narrative is immense. So while we often focus on the quantitative data and have to hit our numbers and what have you, I think telling our leaders a story, giving them a client success story or a journey, or having, better yet, capturing clients' voice themselves and letting them tell the story can resonate quite a bit and give your leaders something to, when they're getting so much flood of information every day and they've got that kind of Finding Nemo Dory syndrome where, they leave a room and suddenly they forget everything they were just told. Those things stick in your brain. That's just basic neuroscience. So I think that the power of story is, I don't know if that's what you were focusing on by story, but I think that there is value to that. And whatever you can help your leaders understand, about your work and the value of it, obviously helps you tenfold.
Stuff.
I agree. And we're really just starting out on our data journey. There were not a lot of analytics where we came from with our new tools. We have a lot more, but we're just getting going with that. Our old doc library, it was so old you couldn't even do Google Analytics on it. So now, even though we can't really draw a lot of conclusions yet, just the fact that we can capture the numbers of people that are coming through and the volume of content they're looking at, when we share that with leadership teams, they're very impressed. And we've gotten a lot of other functions that are now saying, hey, can we take a look at those analytics and see what we can pull from them? So that's, like I said, ID was kind of out of sight, out of mind, where we have a lot more visibility now. We're able to share analytics. We're able to share some success stories where we've been able to quickly fix things for a customer that's called in with a problem and we realize the content's wrong. So I agree that being able to share some sort of a story and where things are working and then just, kind of grow it from there is very useful.
One of the things that really impressed me about what you were just saying, Pat, is that by being able to offer those analytics to other teams, you're actually kind of addressing some of that collaboration question too, that, now you have, you've got the story, you have some information, and maybe it's even the case, and you can certainly tell me, but maybe it's even the case that you don't know exactly what to make of the data that you've been able to collect, but by partnering with other teams, you can come to actually develop the story out of what that data says, beyond what you would know in information development. It may be that you need the product team to help interpret some of these things, which is all for the good, I think.
Right, and I think that's a good point because we look at it and we can say, okay, they're really looking at this content a lot, certain products where they're really going after the content, but there's a lot there that I'm sure there is a lot more intel that could be gathered. Mm-hmm. We're not business analysts or data analysts where other groups have them. Product management has them. The business has them, and those are the folks. When I meet with customer success, they have a business analyst and she wants to take a look. So it's gonna be a collaborative thing coming together and saying, what do we make of all these analytics and what's out there, and try to figure out where we really focus. So it is driving collaboration, and it's kind of I've been in meetings where that it hasn't really been the topic, but you find that point where it's like, hey, we can pull this, look at this, and you show them the dashboard, and it's like, oh, wow, can we have access to that? So it's growing, and I think it will help with the bigger collaboration and the visibility that we're trying to create for ID.
Wonderful. This is great. I'm just noting the time, and I think it might be good to start taking some questions from the folks out in the chat. So when you, if you'd like, everyone, there is a Q&A function. So feel free to ask some questions that way. We're also monitoring the chat. So if you have some other, if you get it into either channel, we will answer the question. The first one I think I'll put to everyone is one that is in the chat. It comes from Jennifer Love. And she asks, how aware are your support teams of your product documentation? Do you provide training demos for the documentation to your support teams? So Billy and Pat, that may be a good question for you. And I think certainly, Seth, if you want to think about that, in your previous experience too, that would be great. But do you all provide training to support on how to use your documentation or how to find certain things?
Yeah, I mean, that's
go ahead, Pat. Go ahead.
I'd say, I mean, it's critical. I mean, it's one thing to make your clients aware of what you have and how to use it, but same with your associates, because they're your front line, and they can drive a lot of the behavior you want as well. So if they know if they know what's available to clients, they can speak to it. They can tell them, teach them while they're on a call with them. And so it's definitely something you don't want to, it's definitely something you want to address. At ADP, that's something that is on our roadmap for the next few weeks. I mean, it's something we've spent a considerable amount of energy digging into our case data, developing content, high value content based on kind of top case data and what's driving those cases. But our associates are unaware of what we're doing for the large part. So we're working with our communications team, learning teams, what have you, to ensure that they not only know and have awareness, but also know how to speak to it. What talk tracks should they use when they're talking to clients, but also be able to kind of see all of that content easily. And that's something that's a challenge for us, is that our current experience is very difficult even for authors to kind of see what is available. So it's even more difficult for your internal associates. So we have to go old school and create spreadsheets and inventories and things and make those available to associates, because it is important. But there's, our goal is to try and, improve that because of the importance of it.
Awesome. And Pat, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah, our support team is obviously painfully aware of our documentation because they were in the business of handing it out for many years when customers couldn't find it. But we have, with the new doc library, we had a training campaign, I'll say, with a lot of the functions, in particular with support, to point out what we have in the doc library, how it works, how they can search, talk about, how it's set up and structured. And we continue to do that. I had a senior manager this morning that was meeting with one of the support teams for one product set to kind of walk through and explain to them how to use the doc library and how to instruct customers and kind of get them to use it for themselves. So it is an ongoing thing to work with them and with the other functions so that everybody is aware how it works.
Awesome. I want to point everybody's attention to a great comment in the chat from Christina. And first, I want to say I love that content culture is becoming the parlance of this panel. Hopefully, it starts to trend, before too long. But I think this is a great comment about the need to socialize the information, not just I think internally, but externally as well, offering ongoing workshops, overview sessions, monitoring channels. Sounds like there's a lot of work that goes into making sure people are kind of up to speed on what's available. And I think that's all part of that cultural change, that sort of change management to go from one paradigm to another. Another question comes from the Q&A from Melissa Coker. What are your thoughts on using a chatbot within the self-help feature? Does anybody have any familiarity with chatbots?
I do. We're not using them at this point in time. I feel like that's a big next step. And we've been through a lot of tools changes and kind of paradigm shifts. So it's not something we've really looked at.
Yeah.
Well-designed chatbot could be a really good interface to your content set. I don't like the chatbots that pop up as soon as you get on a website and ask, if they can help you. They keep like harassing you like at a department store or something like that. But the ones that are there to really help to answer questions, I think it's such a low barrier of entry that it's easy to just ask a simple question, see if it works or not, right? And when I say the barrier of entry, I'm just trying to think of all the reasons that people wouldn't try to use the content to self-help. Like, is it a barrier of entry? Like, what is the cost of doing a search? What is the cost of doing some browsing? And I think a chatbot would be a really, really low barrier of entry to start engaging with the content. I think if you're going to do a chatbot, though, you just need to make sure that it's actually integrated with your overall content strategy. So it's pulling the same content that you would get in all these other touch points you have, because you don't want it to become yet another silo to further complicate your content culture there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. There's another question in the chat from Karen. Hi, Karen. And she asks, are you also getting the information from support teams on tickets that were resolved with customer education? And do you reverse engineer your content strategy from these ticket topics? So are you getting that kind of like, are you using that feedback to address what you offer in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do, and it's been the basis of a lot of our work recently to develop content. But I think what we found is that the CRM data can be often unreliable and inconsistent, and so we're actually waiting. I'll find out in a couple of days on a big business case, and of which one aspect of it is to implement software that allows us to take recorded calls and run it through machine learning and pull insights on those recorded calls, so that we're not relying on kind of maybe a service associate's interpretation of what happened, or their need to just kind of pick certain types as fast as they can, vague topics and things, and to fill out the CRM case and close it as fast as possible. But to actually take the verbatim of what happened on that call, run it through that software and get those insights, and then compare that over thousands of calls. And so that's something that's really important to our content strategy, is having that insight so that we can ensure that we are focusing in the right areas. I mean, it's just one avenue. Obviously, the voice of the client and feedback on our content and those kinds of things, NPS surveys, stuff like that is helpful. But I think it's a data gold mine that we need to tap into.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Interesting data to have something going through machine, because I agree, a lot of times a support person, we really rely on what they put in the ticket for us to get it and have it identified as a doc problem, which is rare. And then even then getting them to actually share the ticket with us. So it's a lot of manual walking through the tickets. A lot of times they don't realize it's a doc issue or that it could be correct. They just don't think in those terms. So it's a difficult thing to tackle. But we are working with support on it, but it's a challenging area. So I like the idea of something that is goes through and analyzes the calls.
Awesome. Got another question in the Q&A. This one comes from Jody Stende. Have you found that generational differences impact the desire to self-serve? For example, do you have any data to support the idea that Gen Xers are less or more likely to self-serve than Gen Zers?
I have strong opinions on this topic. So I will, I'm just going to start by saying I really strongly dislike kind of putting people into generational camps and their information literacy. A lot of my work comes out of academia, and my partner still works in academia and in the same profession, education and really librarianship. So the purview of librarianship is information literacy. So I have written and read many case studies and academic papers on this topic. And what they've found is that most of the time, I mean, people coming out of high school today have very poor information literacy. Just because you're born after 1990 does not mean that you know how to properly work devices, how to properly understand and interpret information that you're finding on the web, how to properly find that information. Yet that is a very common myth. And I have this issue with my leaders because they say, oh, well, that's not a problem. They're young. They can figure it out. They're digital natives. This kind of talk track. Whereas I always laugh because the first person I ever saw use eBay, use chat rooms, make friends online was my grandmother. She was the first person I ever saw use any of that. Meanwhile, and sell books and she would do all kinds of. This was years and years ago. I was a kid going, wow, grandma's really killing it on the web. But I just think that it's a trap to get into and start thinking in terms along these lines of, it depends on generation. I think it's just, my mom's an RN. She works in a hospital, but can't work a phone. She can save your life. She can work the systems in the hospital. Can't work a phone, can't work a laptop. I think it just, I have little kids, and yes, they can navigate on those things with scary precision, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why these things work the way they do. They don't know how to parse, what's good information, what's bad. So I try to avoid kind of thinking in those terms, and despite the fact that our leaders very much want us to. So I think it is a talk track that you have to constantly navigate and, and not kind of, I keep using the word trap, but I don't want to get stuck thinking that way. I want to kind of disregard that in the data and really just look at, demographics are great, but I just want to see kind of objectively what's going on. So yeah, as I said, I have strong opinions on that just because it is something I constantly have to come up against with at work.
That's awesome.
So there's definitely different modalities, like whether or not they, fall down certain lines of categories or not is something that could be debated. If you want to debate that, talk to Billy. But there are different modalities, right? I don't know if y'all remember, maybe I'm aging myself, but when like Google first came out and they had to really train people to use the search bar, because before that, you're using Alta Vista or something like that, you were using like parentheses and operands and there was a help, but the help said like, here's how to use syntax in search, right? Mm-hmm. But Google's help says, just ask a question, right? So it took me years and years and years to actually trust that Google would parse my sentence as well as I could type it semantically with the advanced search features. So I do think there are people that have those different modalities, and I think it comes down to trust. And I do think over time, more and more people are going to begin to trust self-service, regardless of when they were born. I think that trend will increase, I hope.
Awesome. We are about 5 minutes out from the end of our time together, which it goes by so quickly. And I'm wondering if each of you would be willing to give just some closing thoughts. Is there any advice that you want to share? Any last thoughts that you have about any of the topics that we've discussed today? We've covered quite a bit of ground. Pat, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we did cover a lot of ground, and I really like how this kind of turned to content culture, because I think that's what we really need. I think ID, I've seen it at Rocket, where just raising our visibility and where we are in the org has made a huge difference, and I feel like we are trending towards that content culture. And I think a lot of what we're doing will help the analytics, so it's kind of a back and forth thing. But, you know, I just think this has been an interesting discussion. And I like the things that are coming out of it. As
Billy,
far
do
as
you have any?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
oh,
would
go
say
ahead.
just don't oh, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah,
go
sorry to
ahead.
cut you off there, Pat.
No, that's all right. I was just saying, as far as the last bit of advice, I don't know, just, you know, keep going for it. It took a while to get things moving here at Rocket as far as modernizing, but I think now that we have, the ball is rolling, and it's kind of rolling downhill now instead of uphill.
Perseverance, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Excellent. That's great advice.
agreed on all counts, Pat, with that one for sure. I think, you know, the thing I constantly have to remind myself, and I think we all do, is not to forget our audience. It's so easy to get lost in the business side of the house and trying to hit numbers or persuade our leaders and everything else. But I think if you are user/learner/client centric, and you can't fail. So if you're focusing on the real reason we're doing this and trying to, you know, help our clients, you know, have an easier process, or get what they need faster, I think it's just something that is so easy to get lost. And ideally, if you can engage your clients directly, of course do. If not, you know, you try and capture their voice with, you know, other means. So survey responses, content feedback, user behavior through, you know, your product or your systems, call recordings, what have you. I think it's just it's so important that we remember the people who are actually using this, and trying to, even from an authoring perspective, are we authoring in a way that is easy for them to read what we are authoring? You know, every aspect of this process, it warrants the question, you know, of, you know, what about our user? You know, what are we doing to help make this, for, you know, easier for them?
Awesome. And Seth, do you have a quick final bit of advice before we wrap up?
Very quick. I'll just say, you know, thank you for our guest and everybody on the panel. I'm really happy to be here. You know, the title was Content is Your Secret Support Agent. I think the real refrain here is that it shouldn't be a secret. So let's get out there and let's talk about it. Let's get in front of the right people and make sure that we continue to be able to do the great things that we do for our customers. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, one last thing that I'll mention, as we close, there will be a final poll. We'll just ask you for your feedback on the session, and we really hope that you'll just fill that out. That helps us to improve and to come up with cool new ideas. The only other thing that I'll say is content culture. Feel free to, you know, hashtag that in your social media. I think we've got a real winning slogan there. So thanks everybody so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Tom.